start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No Analysis. Comma. Victor applied for the position of office cleaner at a very big company. Victor. The manager interviewed him, then gave him a test, cleaning, stocking, and supplying designated facility areas. After observing what he was doing, the manager said, "You are hired. Give me your email address, and I'll send you some documents to fill out." Victor replied, "I don't have a computer, nor an email." Victor. "I'm sorry," said the manager. And he added, "If you don't have an email, how do you intend to do this job? This job requires you to have an email address. I can't hire you." Victor left with no hope at all. Victor. He didn't know what to do, with only $10 in his pocket. 10. He then decided to go to the supermarket and bought a 10 kilograms box of tomatoes. 10 kg. He then sold the tomatoes in a door-to-door round. In 2 hours, he succeeded to double his capital. He repeated the operation 3 times and returned home with $60. 60. Victor realized that he could survive by this way, and started to go every day earlier, and returned late. Victor. Thus, his money doubled or tripled each day. Shortly later, he bought a cart, then a truck, and then he had his own fleet of delivery vehicles. Several years later, Victor's company became the biggest food company in his city. Victor. He started to plan his family's future, and decided to get a life insurance. He called an insurance broker. When the conversation was concluded, he asked him his email. Victor replied, "I don't have an email." Victor. The broker replied curiously, "You don't have an email, and yet have succeeded to build an empire. Do you imagine what you could have been if you had an email?" He thought for a while, and replied, "An office cleaner." MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 0103. Comma. There once lived a girl named Melanie. Melanie. She wanted to be a ballet dancer. One day, Melanie's mother saw her dancing with the flawless steps and enthusiasm of a ballerina. Melanie. Isn't it strange? Melanie is dancing so well without any formal training." Her mother said. Melanie. I must get her professional lessons to help her polish her skill. The following day, Melanie accompanied her mother to a local dance institute. Melanie. Upon meeting the dance teacher, Mr. Edler, her mother requested to admit Melanie to his institute. Mr. Edler. Melanie. The teacher asked Melanie to audition. Melanie. She was happy and showed him some of her favorite dance steps. However, he wasn't interested in her dance. He was busy with other tasks in the dance room. "You can leave now. The girl is just average. Don't let her waste her time aspiring to be a dancer," he said. Melanie and her mother were shocked to hear this. Melanie. Disappointed, they returned home, tears rolling down Melanie's cheeks. Melanie. With her confidence and ego hurt, Melanie never danced again. Melanie. She completed her studies and became a school teacher. One day, the ballet instructor at her school was running late, and Melanie was asked to keep an eye on the class so that they wouldn't roam around the school. Melanie. Once inside the ballet room, she couldn't control herself. Melanie. She taught the students some steps and kept on dancing for some time. Unaware of time or the people around her, she was lost in her own little world of dancing. Just then, the ballet instructor entered the classroom and was surprised to see Melanie's incredible skill. Melanie. What a performance! The instructor said with a sparkle in her eyes. Melanie was embarrassed to see the instructor in front of her. Melanie. Sorry, ma'am. She said. For what? The instructor asked. You are a true ballerina. The instructor invited Melanie to accompany her to a ballet training center, and Melanie has never stopped dancing since. Melanie. Today, she is a world-renowned ballet dancer. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 0406. Once upon a time there lived a poor but cheerful shoemaker. He was so happy, he sang all day long. The children loved to stand around his window to listen to him. Next door to the shoemaker lived a rich man. He used to sit up all night to count his gold. In the morning, he went to bed, but he could not sleep because of the sound of the shoemaker's singing. One day, he thought of a way of stopping the singing. He wrote a letter to the shoemaker asking him to visit. The shoemaker came at once, and to his surprise the rich man gave him a bag of gold. When he got home again, the shoemaker opened the bag. He had never seen so much gold before. When he sat down at his bench and began, carefully, to count it, the children watched through the window. There was so much there that the shoemaker was afraid to let it out of his sight. So he took it to bed with him. But he could not sleep for worrying about it. Very early in the morning, he got up and brought his gold down from the bedroom. He had decided to hide it up the chimney instead. But he was still uneasy, and in a little while he dug a hole in the garden and buried his bag of gold in it. It was no use trying to work. He was too worried about the safety of his gold. And as for singing, he was too miserable to utter a note. He could not sleep, or work, or sing, and, worst of all, the children no longer came to see him. At last, the shoemaker felt so unhappy that he seized his bag of gold and ran next door to the rich man. "Please take back your gold," he said. The worry of it is making me ill, and I have lost all of my friends. I would rather be a poor shoemaker, as I was before. And so the shoemaker was happy again and sang all day at his work. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 0709. You've been a very good girl this year, Emma. Emma. Tonight, Santa will drop by our house to leave you some presents. Martha told her little girl, smiling. Martha, Martha. And for you too, Fred, she added. Fred. She wanted to give her two children so much more, but this year had been especially hard for Martha. Martha. She had worked day and night to buy some Christmas gifts for her children. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Emma slowly climbed out of bed. Emma. She took out a page from a notebook to write a letter to Santa. She whispered to herself as she wrote. Dear Santa, will you send a few smiles and laughs for my mother? She doesn't laugh much. Martha. And will you send a few toys for Fred as well? Thank you. Fred. Emma folded the letter twice and sealed it within an envelope. Emma. She left the envelope outside the front door and went back to sleep. Emma came running up to her mother the next morning. Emma. Mommy, Santa really did come last night. Martha smiled, thinking of the candies and cookies she must have found in her socks. Emma, Martha. Did you like his gifts? Yes, they are wonderful. Fred loves his toys, too. Fred. Martha was confused. Martha. She wondered how the candies and cookies had become toys overnight. Martha ran into Emma's room and saw a small red box that was half open. Martha. Emma. She knelt down and glanced inside to see its contents. The box contained some toys, countless little candies and cookies. Mommy, this is for you from Santa. Emma said, holding out a card towards Martha. Emma. Martha. Puzzled, she opened it. Martha. It said, Dear Emma's mother. A very Merry Christmas. Hi, I am Amelia. Emma. Amelia. I found your child's letter blowing across the street last night. I was touched and couldn't help but respond. Please accept the gift as a Christmas greeting. Martha felt tears falling down her cheeks. Martha, Martha. She slowly wiped them off and hugged her daughter. Merry Christmas, Emma. Didn't I tell you Santa would come? Emma. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 10-12. Comma. I was on a train in Switzerland. The train came to a stop, and the conductor's voice over the loudspeaker delivered a message in German, then Italian, then French. I had made the mistake of not learning any of those languages before my vacation. After the announcement, everyone started getting off the train, and an old woman saw I was confused and stressed. She came up to me. She spoke some English, and she told me that an accident had happened on the tracks. She asked me where I was trying to get to, then she got off the train and went to a woman in the ticket booth. The old woman got a rail map and timetable from her and came back to tell me that we'd have to hop trains 3 or 4 times to get there. I was really glad she was headed the same way because it would have been hopeless for me to figure it out on my own. So we went from one train station to the next, getting to know each other along the way. It was a 2.5-hour journey in total, and when we finally made it to the destination, we got off and said our goodbyes. 2.5. I had made it just in time to catch my train to Rome, and she told me she had a train to catch too. I asked her how much farther she had to go, and it turned out her home was 2 hours back the other way. She had jumped from train to train and traveled the whole way just to make sure I made it. You are the nicest person I've ever met, I said. She smiled gently and hugged me and told me I'd better hurry off so I wouldn't miss my train. This woman spent her entire day sitting on trains, taking her hours away from her home just to help out a confused tourist visiting her country. No matter how many countries I visit or sites I see, I always say the most beautiful country in the world is Switzerland. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 13-15. Comma. Maria Sutton was a social worker in a place where the average income was very low. Maria Sutton. Many of Maria's clients had lost their jobs when the coal industry in a nearby town collapsed. Maria. Every Christmas season, knowing how much children loved presents at Christmas, Maria tried to arrange a special visit from Santa Claus for one family. Maria. Alice, the 7-year-old daughter of Maria, was very enthusiastic about helping with her mother's Christmas event. Maria 7, Alice. This year's lucky family was a 25-year-old mother named Karen and her 3-year-old son, who she was raising by herself. Karen 253. However, things went wrong. 2 weeks before Christmas Day, a representative from a local organization called Maria to say that the aid she had requested for Karen had fallen through. 2. Maria Karen. No Santa Claus. No presents. Maria saw the cheer disappear from Alice's face at the news. Maria Alice. After hearing this, she ran to her room. When Alice returned, her face was set with determination. Alice. She counted out the coins from her piggy bank, $4.30. $4.30. Mom, she told Maria, I know it's not much. Maria. But maybe this will buy a present for the kid. Maria gave her daughter a lovely hug. Maria. The next day, Maria told her co-workers about her daughter's latest project. Maria. To her surprise, staff members began to open their purses. The story of Alice's gift had spread beyond Maria's office, and Maria was able to raise $300, plenty for a Christmas gift for Karen and her son. Alice Maria, Maria 300 Karen. On Christmas Eve, Maria and Alice visited Karen's house with Christmas gifts. Maria Alice Karen. When Karen opened the door, Maria and Alice wished the astonished woman a Merry Christmas. Karen, Maria, Alice. Then Alice began to unload the gifts from the car, handing them to Karen one by one. Alice, Karen. Karen laughed in disbelief, and said she hoped she would one day be able to do something similar for someone else in need. Karen. On her way home, Maria said to Alice, God multiplied your gift. Maria, Alice. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 1618. 8-year-old Yolanda went to her grandmother's and proudly announced that she was going to be very successful when she grew up and asked her grandmother if she could give her any tips on how to achieve this. Yolanda. The grandmother nodded, took the girl by the hand, and walked her to a nearby plant nursery. There, the two of them chose and purchased 2 small trees. They returned home and planted one of them in the backyard and planted the other tree in a pot and kept it indoors. Then her grandmother asked her which of the trees she thought would be more successful in the future. Yolanda thought for a moment and said the indoor tree would be more successful because it was protected and safe, while the outdoor tree had to cope with the elements. Yolanda. Her grandmother shrugged and said, We'll see. Her grandmother took good care of both trees. In a few years, Yolanda, now a teenager, came to visit her grandmother again. Yolanda. Yolanda reminded her that she had never really answered her question from when she was a little girl about how she could become successful when she grew up. Yolanda. The grandmother showed Yolanda the indoor tree and then took her outside to have a look at the towering tree outside. Yolanda. Which one is greater? The grandmother asked. Yolanda replied, the outside one. Yolanda. But that doesn't make sense, it had to cope with many more challenges than the one inside. The grandmother smiled and said, remember this, and you will be successful in whatever you do. If you choose the safe option all of your life, you will never grow. But if you are willing to face the world with all of its challenges, you will learn from those challenges and grow to achieve great heights. Yolanda looked up at the tall tree, took a deep breath, and nodded her head, realizing that her wise grandmother was right. Yolanda. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 1921. Bahati lived in a small village, where baking bread for a hungry passerby is a custom when one misses someone. Bahati. She had an only son living far away and missed him a lot, so she baked an extra loaf of bread and put it on the windowsill every day, for anyone to take away. Every day, a poor old woman took away the bread, just muttering the good you do, comes back to you. Instead of expressing gratitude. Not a word of gratitude, Bahati said to herself. Bahati. One day, irritated, she was tempted to stop baking extra bread, but soon changed her mind. She baked an extra loaf and kept doing good because the words of the poor old woman kept coming back to her. She placed the bread on the windowsill. The poor old woman took away the loaf as usual, muttering the same words. This time, instead of being irritated, Bahati decided to offer a prayer. Bahati. For years, she had got no news of her son. She prayed for his safety. That night, there was a knock on the door. As she opened it, she was surprised to find her son standing in the doorway. He had grown thin and lean. His clothes were torn. Crying and hugging her son, she gave him clothes to change into and some food. After taking some rest, Bahati's son said, "On my way home, I was so starved that I collapsed. Bahati. I saw an old woman with a loaf of bread. I begged her for a small piece of bread. But she gave me the whole loaf saying my need was greater than hers." It was then that Bahati finally realized the meaning of the words of the poor old woman. Bahati. The good you do, comes back to you. MTC. Good job, Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 22-24. Comma. It was an unbearably hot Chicago day when the emergency call came over the radio for Jacob's firefighting crew to handle a fire in a downtown apartment building. Jacob. When they arrived, the roaring fire was spreading through the whole building. Jacob thought it was already looking pretty hopeless. Jacob. But suddenly, a woman came running up to him yelling at the top of her lungs, "My baby, my Chris is on the 5th floor. Chris 5. Her desperate and urgent voice made Jacob decide to enter the building instantly. Jacob. He made his way up to the 5th floor with another firefighter. 5. By the time they made it up to the 5th floor, the fire had grown so fierce, neither could see more than a few feet in front of them. 5. Jacob's partner looked at him and gave him the thumbs down. Jacob. As a fireman, he knew his partner was right, but he just kept seeing that mother's face in his head. Impulsively, Jacob ran down the hall without his partner, disappearing into the flames. Jacob. As flames shot out of the apartment like fireballs, he could see a little boy lying on the floor in just about the only spot that wasn't on fire. He didn't even have time to figure out if he was alive or dead. He just grabbed him and rushed out. Jacob and the boy cleared the 5th floor landing just as the firemen could hear the sound of the floor above collapsing. Jacob 5. The tense crowd below broke into cheers as they saw Jacob emerge from the building with the boy. Jacob. Holding Chris against his chest, Jacob could feel the boy's heart pounding, and when he coughed from the smoke, Jacob knew Chris would survive. Chris Jacob Chris. Paramedics tended to the boy while Jacob himself fell to the ground. Jacob. 2 weeks after the rescue, 2 people visited Jacob at the station: Chris and his mother. 2. Chris Jacob. They came to thank him and told him they were forever in his debt. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 25-27. Comma. 6 months ago, 55-year-old Billy Ray Harris was homeless. 655 Billy Ray Harris. He lived on a street corner in Kansas City, holding out a cup and asking passers-by for spare change. Kansas City. But then, one day, his life changed. In February, Sarah Darling passed Harris at his usual spot and dropped some change into his cup. To Sarah Darling Harris. But she also accidentally dropped in her engagement ring. Though Harris considered selling the ring, he got it appraised for $4,000. A few days later, he returned the ring to Darling. Harris 4,000, Darling. I am not trying to say that I am a saint, but I am no devil either, he said at the time. As a way to say thank you, Darling gave Harris all the cash she had with her. Darling Harris. Then her husband, Bill Krechke, launched a Give Forward page to collect money for Harris. Bill Krechke Harris Give Forward. As of mid-morning Tuesday, close to $152,000 had been donated. 152,000. Over the weekend, he spoke with Harris about what he's planning to do with the donations, and knew that he had a very solid plan of making it happen. Harris. The fund raised far more than any of them expected. In just 3 months, people donated more than $190,000. 3190,000. Harris talked to a lawyer, who helped him put the money in a trust. Harris. Since then, he's been able to buy a car and even put money down on a house, which he's fixing up himself. And that's not all. After he appeared on TV, his family members who had been searching for him for 16 years were able to find him. TV16. They were happily reunited, and Harris is now working on his relationship with them. Harris. And the Kansas City community hasn't forgotten about Harris and his good deed. Kansas City Harris. I still see some of the same people, he says, but only now, instead of coming up and giving me change, they're coming up shaking my hand and saying, "Hey, good job." ... Since the fateful day that Darling's ring landed in his cup, Harris's life has turned completely around. Darling Horace. I want to thank all the people that helped me out, he says. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 2830. Once upon a time there was a king of Armenia, who, being of a curious turn of mind and in need of some change, sent his men throughout the land to make the following proclamation. Hear this. Whatever man among you can prove himself the most outrageous liar in Armenia shall receive an apple made of pure gold from the hands of His Majesty the King. People began to swarm to the palace from every town and village in the country, people of all ranks and conditions, princes, merchants, farmers, priests, rich and poor, tall and short, fat and thin. There was no lack of liars in the land, and each one told his tale to the king. None of those lies, however, convinced the king that he had listened to the best one. The king was beginning to grow tired of his new sport and was thinking of calling the whole contest off without declaring a winner. Then there appeared before him a poor, ragged man, carrying a large sack over his shoulder. "What can I do for you?" asked His Majesty. "Sire," said the poor man, slightly bewildered. "Surely you remember? You owe me a pot of gold, and I have come to collect it." "You are a perfect liar, sir!" exclaimed the king. "I owe you no money." "A perfect liar am I," said the poor man. "Then give me the golden apple." The king, realizing that the man was trying to trick him, said, "No, no. You are not a liar." "Then give me the pot of gold you owe me, sire," said the man. The king saw the dilemma. He handed over the golden apple. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 3133. It was 1983 and Sloop was entering the 6th grade. 1983 Sloop 6. The one class she looked forward to was chorus, but something happened early in the semester that is still in her memory. The students were arranged into groups on the risers, altos, sopranos, tenors, and baritones. The music teacher, a woman with a seemingly permanent frown on her face, led the choir in a familiar song, using a pointer to click the rhythm of the song on a music stand. Then the teacher started walking over toward Sloop. "Sloop." Suddenly she stopped the song and addressed her directly. "Your voice is not blending in with the other girls at all. Just pretend to sing." For the rest of the year, whenever the choir sang, she mouthed the words. She recalls, "Chorus was supposed to be my favorite thing. My family said I could sing, but the teacher said I couldn't. So I started to question everything." She began to act out, hanging out with the wrong crowd at school. It was a dark time. In the summer after her 7th grade year, Sloop attended a camp for gifted kids and surprised herself by participating in chorus. 7. During practice, she mouthed the words, but the teacher noticed it. After class she invited Sloop to sit next to her on the piano bench and asked her to sing together. Sloop. Then the teacher looked her in the eyes and said, "You have a distinctive, expressive, and beautiful voice." For the rest of that magical summer, Sloop experienced a metamorphosis, shedding her cocoon and emerging as a butterfly looking for light. Sloop. She became confident in her singing. In high school, she joined the theater department and played the leading role in almost every musical production. She grew comfortable in front of audiences until, in her proudest moment, she sang with her choir at Carnegie Hall. Carnegie Hall. This was the same girl who had once been told to mouth the words. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 3436. Once, there were two woodcutters, a young, strong one and an old one, cutting down trees in a jungle. The young man was very hard-working. On his first day, he worked through his break time and complained that the old man was wasting time, taking several breaks to eat and drink. That day, the young woodcutter brought 15 trees to their boss. 15. Fantastic! The boss said. Keep up the great work. Highly motivated by his words, the young woodcutter tried harder the next day, but he could only bring 10 trees. 10. The third day he tried even harder, but he was only able to bring 7 trees. 7. Day after day, he was bringing less and less trees. As time went by, he noticed that even though he worked through his break time and hardly took a rest, the old woodcutter was cutting down the same amount of trees as him and sometimes chopped down even more. It was as if the old man worked through the break time just as he did. So, the young woodcutter decided to work harder the next day. Unfortunately, the results were even worse. I must be losing my strength, the young man thought. One day, the old man invited him for a drink during the break time. The young man refused and said he had no extra time. Then, the old man smiled and said to him, "It is a waste of effort to keep chopping trees without resharpening your axe. Sooner or later, you will have to give up because you've spent too much energy." Suddenly the young woodcutter realized that during break times while the old man was having a drink, he was also resharpening his axe, which the young woodcutter never did. That's how he could chop more than the young man in less time. The old man said that we all need time to relax, to think and meditate, and to learn and grow. If we don't take the time to sharpen the axe, we will become dull and lose our effectiveness. MTC